Hey everyone, it's you know who by now with your latest video review, since I know I have a long time without uploading any reviews to this channel. So here we are once again, and as I promised on my last episode of Pretty Shitty Pickups, here is your review for the SUPERPAD for the Nintendo GameCube. The SUPERPAD GameCube controller from Interact. So obviously what that means is that no, this is not an original standard Nintendo brand GameCube controller for their console. However, if you were to see this controller from far away, you might confuse it with one simply due to the fact that it has the exact same color scheme as an original Nintendo brand controller would. If you take a look at this controller though and you analyze it, you can see that the left top stick is in the exact left top position as it would be on an original Nintendo brand controller, although this one is black as opposed to the nice grayish color that an original one does. And when you first use it, it feels great, though as you can see here, as I move it, it doesn't have the exact same kind of resistance that an original Nintendo controller would. It's actually a bit more loose, and so therefore due to that fact it's not as resistant, because say you're playing an intense game of Super Smash Bros. Brawl or Melee and you try to dodge your opponent's attacks, it's not as effective for that, and you find yourself not moving as fast as you would when using an original controller. So this stick is not as responsive, though not by much, but it's definitely a good stick for this kind of controller and for the price that I got it for. Moving down though, as you can see, you have a black D-pad as opposed to a grayish whitish D-pad on a standard controller, and it feels more like a GameGear or Sega Genesis D-pad than it does a Nintendo D-pad, because basically you just sit your thumb in the middle and you can easily choose any direction that you want to move into, and it's comfortable because your thumb just sits in the middle and you can choose any direction with ease. So I'm definitely a fan of this D-pad, and it feels pretty good, although again it's a bit wobbly but not too much, so it's definitely not bad. And I'm a fan of this D-pad, although I know it won't be for everybody if you happen to get this SUPERPAD controller. You move a little to the right though and you have the Interact logo as you can see here, and then you move a little more to the right and you have your yellow C-stick that you know and love by now, and as you would see on a standard Nintendo controller. As you can see though, you fit your thumb on the top as the exact same design that an original would, and it feels great. This one actually has a bit more resistance than this stick has up here, so it feels great, and I've tested it out with a few games such as Day of Reckoning 2, and it functions just about as well as an original Nintendo stick would. So that's definitely good, and it's a stick I definitely like. You move to the center though, as you can see right there, it says Start, Pause. So definitely the start and pause button on the center, located on these ridges that separate it from the top of the rest of the controller and from the bottom parts of the controller. You take a look at the top center right here, you obviously have the SUPERPAD logo right above the rumble option for this controller. So as you can see right there, it says off, and I pretty much always have it on off because I don't really use the rumble function for anything really, but when I do have it on, it doesn't bother me. So I haven't tested the rumble function on the SUPERPAD controller, so I really can't tell you how well that works with this. Moving on though to the right, as you can see, you have your red B button, which feels exactly the same as it would on an original controller. Same goes for the greenish bluish A button and the gray Y and X buttons, which are basically located and mapped exactly as on an original Nintendo controller. So they feel nice, and right away when you pick this up, you won't have any problem reaching these as you're playing an intense game of, well, any game such as Super Smash Bros. Brawl. You move to the top right here and you have your Z button, which feels pretty great actually. It feels like a standard Nintendo Z button. It doesn't feel wobbly like the stick or the D-pad may, so definitely feels good to press, and it's very responsive, so no problem with that. You move on to the back though, And this is where the controller starts to look just a bit different, because the molding on the handles of this controller is quite different from those seen on an original Nintendo GameCube controller, because the handles on this are just a bit thinner and they're longer than on an original Nintendo GameCube controller. So when you first pick this up and you start playing with this, it takes a day or two to really get the hang of the design and the feel of the SUPERPAD controller, because it's slightly different from the molding of the handles of an original controller. So though you might not like that at first, like I didn't at first, you'll get used to it in a day or 2 or 3, so that's not really a big problem if you happen to pick this controller up. As you can see though, the trigger buttons feel exactly the same as they would on an original controller, so that's definitely good. They don't feel all wobbly like one may think that they would, so that's good. And they feel good to press, and your fingers fit right into the curves that it has. As you can see though, the sticker right here says that this controller complies with the FCC rules, whatever those happen to be. It says SUPERPAD, the model number, and that it's from Interact, and I'm not familiar with that company, I have to admit. And it passed the QC test, the quality test that I assume this passed through. So in short, the SUPERPAD controller from Interact is definitely a controller that I recommend, and a controller that I'm a fan of. If you can't find a Nintendo brand GameCube controller for your GameCube, this is probably the next best thing, and better than those crappy GameStop controller that you can find on GameStop, because these are built in a very nice way and they feel really good when you hold them after you get used to them. So the SUPERPAD controller from Interact is definitely a controller that I recommend. This was the review, and as always, thank you for watching, and say bye to the SUPERPAD controller from Interact, and not from Nintendo. But he thanks you for watching.